You testified that when you got to Moselle the night of the 7th, that you went through the main entrance, and that's the entrance with the brick facade or whatever, the brick gates opening up. That's the main entrance you went in?
Yes, there's a brick facade and then I think they're metal iron gates, okay. But they were open.
And then if you go up and you would have gone straight to the house if you'd gone straight, but you turned right, and you said, and there's a little roadway there, an old runway, and you were able to get back up to where the kennels were from that direction, correct?
That's correct. It's not far when you turn right. A couple hundred yards maybe.
And then, but you said you were able to see shell casings, what you thought would be 223. Where were they?
The one, I don't think I saw every one that was there. I remember seeing one, seems like in the driveway. Closer to the road from Paul and Maggie's bodies.
So were you able to get inside the crime scene tape?
I don't know if there was crime scene tape up at that point in time.
Okay. So you were able, as you recall, just to walk up. Well, were Maggie and Paul's bodies covered at the time you got there?
Yes.
But you were able to get into the crime scene close enough where you could tell what you thought was the caliber of the shell case.
Right, and I didn't walk from where I was parked there. I walked completely around the hangar and went over to talk to people I knew that were there, the fire and rescue people, just to get what their assessment was. And I could see from where they were positioned, I could see, I didn't get over it, but I could see from a distance, and I'm very familiar with
Sure.
firearms, and I saw what I thought was a 223 casing.
And you later learned, I guess, the next day on the 8th that it wasn't a 223 but a 300 blackout. Is that right?
Yes, and I can't for the life of me tell you there was at that point in time there was some law enforcement out in the hangar and around, and I just asked a question and they corrected me.
Right. Okay. And that, and you started to assist any way you could with trying to find out who could have done this. Isn't that right?
Well, Jim, I didn't that night. I was trying to get, and we were starting to. I don't know. It was shot, man. But out in the days following, we had a lot of conversation amongst my partners and I about who could have done this, and obviously we were theorizing on stuff, and with very little information, obviously, but we were trying to find out things, whether Paul had been in an argument with anyone, or if anybody had. I don't know. It's just what you would naturally do is ask questions.
One of the things, you went down to Jimmy Butler's. You remember that?
I did.
Now, what's Jimmy Butler?
Jimmy Butler's a business in Varnville that does mechanic work. He sells trailers. He sells portable buildings. Used to sell cars, but I had learned that Paul had taken his truck there the Friday before the murders.
Right. And so the Friday before the murders, Paul's truck, and what was his normal truck? Was it F?
It was a F-150.
A white F-150.
White F-150.
And you had understood that his white F-150 was put in the shop at Jimmy Buck.
Yes, and I specifically was going to see if Paul's guns were in his truck.
Right. And did you check the truck?
I did. I looked inside of it, and I also got. I had learned that Mr. Rowe was working for Ellick at the time, and had taken him over to pick him up when he took his truck to drop off for repairs. And I asked Mr. Butler to pull surveillance tape so I could see if Paul got his guns out of his truck while he was getting out of one vehicle into another.
And because it was Paul's habit to carry the guns in his truck, right?
Right, and I believe actually when I looked in there was still a pistol and some shotgun shells, that type of stuff in there. But I didn't see any long guns. I didn't get inside of his truck and rummage around. I just looked.
And so you didn't observe any 300 blackout or any shotgun in Paul's truck at Jimmy Buck. Is that right?
I did not.
And then I think you also looked at videotape to see if Paul took guns out of his truck when he got back in. I guess Mr. Rowe picked him up. Is that right?
That's correct. And another one of another pickup that Ellick had on the farm.
And you didn't see Paul removing any guns from his truck when he got in the truck with Mr. Rowe?
That was not evident on the video.
Okay.
And I could see him getting out of one vehicle into the other.
And you were down there on the morning of the 8th, and after SLED had released the crime scene. And when I say there, I'm talking about down at the kennels. Were you not?
Yes, I was asked to go there by Randy's brother, Ellick.
Okay. And I don't want to be too grotesque at all, but just were there still blood and biological material there at the scene?
Yes.
Okay. And did you notice that there were some still birdshot pellets in the feed room that had not been collected by the SLED agent?
Yes. They were what appeared to me to be we could pretty much tell what they were, yeah, from looking at them. And I believe they would have been a TSS type load.
Okay. And did you gather those up, to your knowledge?
Did I?
You or anybody, with you?
Mr. Griffin, I apologize.
Call me.
We know each other, so I
Please,
apologize.
call me Jim.
That area in that room, well, we could see them. It was so bad. We thought we were going to, at some point, clean it up, but it overwhelmed both my partner, Mark, and I. Well, we could see that, and we could see everything, all the other aftermath. We were getting biological material I mean, just couldn't be there. It was bad, you know, and it was overwhelming us. So, no, I did not try to collect evidence.
And the scene inside that feed room, I take it as something that still is etched in your mind's eye memory.
Yes.
When you were down there, when you got there the first time, I believe you went up to Mark Ball, and he was there. He got there before you.
Maybe a few minutes. Okay. We had already talked about, you know, that.
Did it look to you and Mark like the crime scene was being preserved and carefully keeping people off of areas that maybe they shouldn't be trampling on?
Well, it was my understanding that the crime scene had been released, so that.
Well, I'm talking about 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, I jumped back. 11 o'clock when you got there, around 11 on the night of the 7th. When you pulled up, as I understand, you walked around the shed, the workshop, and went to the back, and maybe Mr. Ball was back there. I could have that wrong, but is that what happened?
Well, we were there. I saw people working through the crime scene, and you're kind of asking me for an opinion that I don't feel qualified to give, because I assumed that whatever was going on was being done with whatever procedures. But there were people in that in the crime scene doing various things.
Okay. And I'm not asking you to give an opinion. I would just ask you if anyone expressed an opinion in your presence about they shouldn't be doing this or should be doing that.
I don't specifically recall.
Okay. Well, did at some point in time you and Mark and whoever else, were y'all directed to go to the main residence at?
We were, and for the life of me, I can't tell you who told us to go. I can tell you it was at the time that whoever is the photographer for the crime scene, they were getting ready to start, taking photographs, and it was stated that we're going to photograph the scene. Y'all go to the house. We don't, you don't need to be in these photographs.
Okay. And so who all went to the house, best you can remember?
I know I did. I know Mark did. Austin Crosby, who's one of my partners, did. Danny Henderson did. Randy Murdaugh did. John Marvin did. Elliot at some point did. And he may have been, I believe he was accompanied by some officers when he came. I think maybe Chris Wilson may have. The others I'm positive of, but sure. There could have been a couple other people.
And had it looked to you like anybody from law enforcement had searched the residence, inspected the residence before you guys went in?
I don't know that I would know what it would look like if it had been searched. It was my perception that it had not been searched yet.
And then you mentioned at some point in time, Alec came up, and maybe law enforcement were with him?
Mr. Griffin, my memory is that Alec came in, and at or about the same time, 2 agents came, and I remember them collecting his clothes is what stands out to me. One stood in the doorway or the foyer to the house. We were kind of in the living room and maybe the kitchen area, and then another agent, and I'm assuming it was SLED, but it was kind of blurry, and it happened pretty quickly. Went maybe to the door of a bedroom while Elliot was changing clothes, and then he brought his clothes out and gave them to the agent who stood in the edge of the living room or foyer or whatever you want to call it.
And did the agent just open up a bag and Alec dumped his clothes in the bag? Is that how you remember it? A paper bag?
I do not know what the composition of the bag was. It was a bag, and it seemed to me the agent was holding the bag out, like, open.
Right.
And that Alec kind of had his clothes in his fingers and just dropped them in, is what my memory was. And what that was, I only recall there being one bag, and he dropped them in, and it was like a pretty quick transaction.
His clothes were not put on a hanger, for sure. Is that right?
No, Elliot had them in his hands when he came out of the bedroom. He was in there long enough to take those off, and I think he put back on another pair of shorts or something and a shirt.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm jumping around a little bit.
It's okay. I've been right where you are,
Right.
and that happens.
I think you mentioned in one of your interviews with SLED that Alec had some annoying quirks, and one of them he would just take phone calls in the middle of the deposition.
He would.
Would he get phone calls from his family, Buster, Maggie, and Paul, and drop everything and take the calls?
I've witnessed that.
Was that frequent?
Yes, he would do it in depositions. He would do it in the middle of a conversation, and not with them, but definitely with them. And even in partner meetings and stuff, he would take a call and walk out of the room.
Sure. You had mentioned in your testimony that when you were asked by this second juror about this Ferris fee issue, that really your concern was not that Alec was diverting fees, but he was trying to shelter fees from being disclosed in the civil case. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, let's make sure definitionally we're talking about the same thing. My concern was not that he was stealing because I trusted him. I had no reason to believe that he was stealing. It was the latter, that what she conveyed to me was he was wanting to hide some fees or hide money somehow. I don't remember it being said that it was like I heard earlier in Maggie's name. It was just that he was going to take the fees from Chris Wilson's account so there wouldn't be any record, is the way I understood it, in our trust account.
Right. And you said, F no, we're not doing that.
Those were my words.
Right. The what was Alex? Scratch that. The after the murders of Maggie and Paul, did you the immediate aftermath and going forward a few months, did Alec come to the office much?
It was sporadic, but you know, I knew that he was having a lot of trouble sleeping, and you know, just lost his family and his father, and him and his father were very close. We were aware that, or had understanding that he was taking like medicine to try to help him sleep, and maybe for anxiety, and just you know, the normal things that you would expect there. So even when he came, I would walk in his office and he'd be falling asleep in his chair. He'd be sitting in there, you know, which was evident to me that he wasn't sleeping well. And so I know Ms. Seckinger mentioned pills earlier that he was taking. That's what we knew he was taking, because he couldn't sleep at night. He'd be up at all hours of the night.
And did you notice changes in his physical appearance, losing weight?
Yes, he was losing weight. I don't think he was eating very well by all reports.
And I guess let's sort of go back. The night of June 7th, the morning of June 8th was, I mean, what was his demeanor?
Well, his demeanor is that he was upset. I could tell that, and you know.
You see him cry?
Yeah, we cried together. I mean, he kept telling me, especially to me, he kept telling me how much Paul loved me, and you know, every time he would say that, we would it would be emotional. I mean, and then he told me that several times over the next few days. It was just almost be how he would start a conversation with me would be to talk about Paul.
And then did he spend a lot of time with Buster down at Maggie's parents in Somerville, to your knowledge?
I knew they were. Can you give me the time frame?
So starting in June?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I know he and Maggie's parents had a good relationship. And I recall, because in some of this, I remember seeing some texts between he and I that he was down there. I don't remember. Well, they're dated. I'm sure you have them.
Right.
And he told me he was down with Maggie's parents. It was one of the days in that time immediately following the murders.
Right. And then at one point in time around, I don't know if it's 4th of July, did he come to your place by boat, or do you remember that? And
Can't say that it was on the 4th of July, but I remember his brother Randy and his wife. I had invited them to my house, you know, for the 4th, and you know, for to spend, and they had, you know, something that those of us in the law firm do a lot, to spend time on the weekends together, and they were there, and I'd asked Alec to come over, and he and Buster came by boat from Edisto.
right. And Alec was carrying a gun with him on the boat, was he not?
Yes, he had a gun in a what I want to call a shopping bag, like a cloth type, you know, shopping bag, not one of those plastic ones.
Had you ever seen Alec carrying a gun around before for protection before the murders?
No.
Some point in time, Alec and Buster and the family put out a reward, did they not, for capture of tips for whoever would lead to the arrest of whoever killed Maggie and Paul. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and who all was involved in the funding of it, I don't know, but there was a reward, I believe was I know a reward was put out.
And the firm agreed to administer it if there was anyone step forward.
We did.
1 second, Your Honor. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Firm have to ever pay anybody for that reward?
No.
You're asked a lot of questions about your interactions and relationship with Alec Murdaugh. You've known Alec Murdaugh how long?
Well, I guess a total of 25 years or so.
Did you really know Alec Murdaugh?
Character evidence.
What's the question?
Did he really know Alec Murdaugh?
Purely a character question.
Did he know Alec Murdaugh? Did he really know Alec Murdaugh?
Yes, sir.
I sustain the objection.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything